The following is a presentation of the bleav Sports Media Network.
Let me just say, after Vera distorting the belt, they're proclaiming the real world champion. I'm going to tell y'all, with a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life. When you walk around this world and you tell everybody you're number one, the only way you get to stay number one is to be number one.
Woo! Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Captain Lou Extravaganza live here on the Captain Lou Sports Network, powered up by the Belly Up Sports Network of podcasts. Sit back and enjoy as we bring you the latest and greatest in the world of sports, everything from the Detroit Lions to the state of Michigan sports to around the country and around the world. So what are you waiting for? Let's get out there and let's watch the latest edition of the Captain Lou Extravaganza. And good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Captain Lou Extravaganza. We are live here on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. And of course, we are powered up by the Belly Up Network of podcasts. We've got a great show planned for you. It's January 11th, by the way, Wednesday. Glad you could be with us here tonight on the show. We got a great show planned for you. Coming on here very shortly will be Jake Ellenbogen, the CEO of the DowntownRams, and of course the host of the bleav Rams podcast. And we're going to talk LA Rams and NFL football with him in the first portion of our show. Then at 8:15, Max Bultman, the beat writer for the Detroit Red Wings from The Athletic, will join us, and we'll get his take on the Detroit Red Wings on the first half of their 2022-2023 season. And of course, later on in the show, we will have our 6-point teaser locks of the week playoff style in the NFL. So make sure you stick around. We got a lot to go over tonight. Without any further ado, let's get to our Captain Lou Extravaganza guest line and welcome in Jake Ellenbogen from the DowntownRams. Jake, thanks for taking time out tonight. Welcome back. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Lou. I'm happy to be back. Doing well. Happy to be here.
Good deal. Well, first off, I got to say, poor old Baker couldn't quite do it for us, being a Lions fan. He gave it his best, and he looked pretty good. Just that last long pass, man, just a little more under it, and I think we would have had a Rams upset.
Yeah, I think so too. Kind of wish, McVay ahead of time, kind of looked at the course of the game. Was not Baker's best game, and I kind of wish they just tried to run the ball with Cam Akers, taking advantage of the fact that they only needed a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
But, you got to be able to make that throw in the NFL. And, he can make that throw. We've seen him make it before. Just wasn't to be in that one.
Well, I think he had a heck of a run considering how much time that he really had to get prepared with the Rams, picked up on waivers and whatnot. Yeah, I think he could be a good backup for you guys next year. We could talk about Baker real quick. What do you see maybe in his plans coming in 2023?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Because I think Baker could go, any which way, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could come back, to the Rams. He has to understand, obviously, he'd be a backup, right? So it's tough for him because you're going to want to start. You've been starting. You started right from the get-go. I mean, obviously, he didn't start the first game, but he played 98% of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to feel weird if he has to back up. And I'm sure he doesn't want to be in that territory. He won the job outright against Sam Darnold in camp. So I think, you look at a list of teams around the league. I think there's plenty of teams that would be interested in his services. Now, the problem is there are plenty of teams that are interested, but how many of them are interested in him being, a starter, right?
Right.
And so I just don't know the number there. And then, I think if he is going to be a backup, I think he'd rather just stay in LA. But that also depends on whether or not Sean McVay stays.
Boy, that's the $1 million question. I'll ask you that in a minute, what your opinion is on that. But the LA Rams season, what a contrast to last year. A storybook season for Matt Stafford and the Rams. It was like they could do nothing wrong, and it was all in the cards for them. But boy, oh boy, Jake, we talk about injuries. It hits every team, but I honestly think that it couldn't have hit a team harder than it hit your Rams with obviously Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford, Aaron Donald. I mean, have you ever seen a year of injuries like this that hit the Los Angeles Rams this year?
It's similar. The season after Sam Bradford and the Rams came just one game short of making the playoffs. They lost the finale in Seattle, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the year after, they implemented this offense with Josh McDaniels. And I felt like it was so complicated, it was literally getting players hurt. So there were guys out of position. Danny Amendola dislocates his elbow. You had Sam Bradford going through, a high ankle sprain the entire season. He was dealing with it. And then you had just the whole cornerback room was decimated. Everyone, they were decimated with injuries. I remember they took Josh Gordy off his couch and he ended up being the number one corner for them to end the season. So that was the closest I think I've seen to what I saw this year. But this year, it wasn't just the number of injuries, because I think that 2011 team might have actually had more injuries. I think it was the level of where the injuries were at. And when you have that many in the interior, in the trenches, on the offensive line, having 16 different guys having to start, I mean, basically setting a record. I just think that's really what did them in. It wasn't even Stafford. It wasn't even Donald. It wasn't even Kupp. I really think that they could have made the playoffs. If you're telling me that I could keep one area of, the team fully healthy the whole year, I'm picking the offensive line. And I think a fully healthy offensive line gels. And I think at the end of the year, you're looking at a team that can block, in the run game, and a team that can protect whatever quarterback's back there. And we've seen it. I mean, if you're in the NFL, you're capable of making all the throws. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you can't play quarterback in the NFL. So, I think at the end of the day, if you had John Wolford, Bryce Perkins, or whoever behind an offensive line that's keeping them clean the entire game, doesn't matter who's back there. I think they would have been able to thrive in McVay's offense, and I think we'd be talking about the Rams in the playoffs.
Boy, that's such a great point. I think about that, and I look at what the Detroit Lions had this year for an offensive line, and it was amazing. This is probably the best offensive line Detroit's had in 30 years. And, Goff had a hell of a year in Detroit, and your point is well taken. And it all goes back to they build championship teams on the line of scrimmage, both sides. And that's such an awesome point.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, that's kind of just how I felt, I think this year kind of just reminds you just how important the offensive line is. Mm-hmm. They may not be, the superstars of it, right? They may not be the guys in Campbell's Chunky commercials or guys in Papa John's commercials, right?
Right.
They're not as appreciated as far as stardom, but it's the collection of five guys. And what I've been using this like explanation, analogy, whatever you want to call it, pretty much the whole year. When you take a chain of what is the offensive line, essentially, you have 5 links and they're all made of steel. And when you take that chain and you dislodge one of the links, which is an injury, mm-hmm. Now that steel link, you're replacing that with a paper link, or you're replacing that with a link made out of macaroni or whatever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's not as strong, obviously. So the chain is not a chain anymore. It's going to fall apart, And as soon as one of those links falls apart, now you have that weak link, and your offensive line is only as strong as the weakest player on that offensive line. And unfortunately for the Rams, starting 5 different left tackles, having a myriad of players, playing center, playing guard, it did them in. And while they had moments where you're like, okay, you're starting to see some momentum building here, there would be an injury. Same thing in Seattle game. I think when that offense started to kind of sputter a little bit, I don't think it was a shock that it happened the moment that veteran 38-year-old tackle Tyan Secchi goes down with a wrist injury, who's like the 5th option at left tackle. And then all of a sudden now you're dealing with playing a 7th round rookie who has never played, big minutes at left tackle, and so now all of a sudden he's in the game when the game is on the line, and you're getting stuff, pressure off your blind side. And I think that was a big reason why they lost that game. I think if Secchi stays healthy, I definitely think they win, among other reasons, but
right.
you know what I mean there.
Oh, sure. We're joined by Jake Ellenbogen from the Downtown Rams, also the host of the Bleav in Rams podcast here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza, here on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. Let's get back to the high-profile questions. We see a report yesterday, I believe it was, or maybe it had been this morning, where Sean McVay said it was okay for his coordinators and coaches to go after lateral moves, if you will. The $1 million question deep down, Jake, do you see Sean McVay coming back? Do you see him taking a break? This might be the right time for him to do it. We've heard Matt Stafford talk on his wife's podcast that he plans on playing, but I think it all starts with Sean McVay. Do you see him coming back?
So it's interesting because I was told he was coming back.
Okay.
And then right after that, he gets asked in a press conference or whatever, I think it was on Friday before the game, and he says, Los Angeles is where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then right after that, all this news comes out, like the day of the game. You have, basically Jake Glazer saying, yeah, I don't think he's going to come back. I think he's pretty much, a done deal. He's gone. You have Mike Florio take with a grain of salt on NBC saying he's not only done, he doesn't want to coach with the Rams. Like he doesn't want to retire. He just doesn't want to be with the Rams, which I don't buy for a second.
I don't either.
You had Adam Schefter, who you start to get into Adam Schefter territory, Ian Rappaport, and your ears do perk up. But I'm going to stick with my gut here. I'm going to stick with what I was told first. I don't think he's leaving. I don't think he's made up his mind yet for sure. Like I do think he's on the fence,
Mm-hmm.
but I think ultimately he's going to stay. And I think the thing that is interesting here is it kind of goes back to what I've been saying as somebody that's covered the Rams since 2016 and clearly has covered the Rams since he's joined the team,
Mm-hmm.
is that Sean McVay, 2017, 2018, genius. He completely changed the offense. He completely changed the course of this franchise. And 2019 was the aftermath of the Super Bowl. It was the aftermath of Vic Fangio and Bill Belichick figuring out his offense. And the aftermath basically led to all these teams studying how in the Super Bowl, in front of everyone on television, everyone saw it across the country, across the world. Everyone saw how to beat the Rams offense. Okay.
Yeah.
So now everyone's going to copy that blueprint. And in 2019, Jared Goff immediately takes a step back. Sean McVay took a step back. Todd Gurley took a step back. It was the perfect storm of really bad things to come. And Sean McVay in 2020 was starting to kind of change his offense a little bit. Obviously, they can't be the high-octane passing attack they were in 2018, so they have to do things a little differently. Because what they were doing, they were using a lot of different legal picks and basically scheming guys open, making it easy for Jared Goff, using Todd Gurley out of the backfield as a pass catcher who could be so dangerous and just making things easy on Jared. And unfortunately, it got to the point where Jared could not go to the level of where Sean McVay needed him to go. So come 2020, you have an elite defense, and then you have Sean McVay who's trying to get Goff on that level, but he isn't joining him there. So then they trade for Stafford 2021. As great as Stafford was, as great as the offense was, I've still always had issues with Sean McVay's play calling. I think more often than not, he's a good play caller,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he is a better schemer than a play caller. So this goes to what I'm saying right now, is that I think he will be back, and I think he's finally admitting to himself that, hey, I just can't do this anymore as far as play calling. If I want to be a head coach, I can't just say, you know what, we're going to move on from Wade Phillips so I can take the training wheels off and I can have more stock into the defense. I can put together more, spend more time with the defense. You can't do everything. And so I think now Sean McVay comes back with the realization, okay, this year, really sucked. I'm going to go out. I'm going to get my guy, Cliff Kingsbury, who's at my wedding. I trust the guy, and he'll be calling the plays. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Wow.
I personally, I prefer Frank Reich. I think Reich is less likely to get plucked for a head coaching job again.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that in an offensive way. He's not like the young, sexy option. Like if Cliff Kingsbury, turns this offense around, it's going to be given to Cliff Kingsbury, right? People are going to be like, oh, okay,
yeah,
now I'm going to hire this guy, right? It's going to reset it, the stock game and everything. His stock goes way up. If it's Frank Reich, people still are going to be like, well, he's an older head coach. It didn't really work in Indy, And so I think Frank Reich is important here because Sean McVay, his biggest issue, Lou, is the fact that he's constantly having to onboard these new coaches. When you're constantly getting plucked, your entire coaching staff is getting plucked. You're in and you're out. That's a lot of onboarding. And while this guy is 100% all for pushing these guys, moving forward, and improving their quality of life, their quality of career, because they're working hard. So he's trying to push them. He believes in promotion, whether it's from within or from outside the organization. Eventually, that's going to take a toll on him, and I think it has. And so now, my proposal is, I think it'll be Kingsbury, which is kind of talking about what I don't want to see about a guy leaving. But I think that Frank Reich would make the most sense because I think he's less likely to leave, would create some stability. It would be like Al Saunders when he was with the Rams back in the day. You get that, stability, older veteran play caller, and that way you can just be the leader of men that you want to be.
Boy, that's a great point. Consistency and continuity, getting that on a day in and day out basis. Another great analogy. Jake, what do you think the Rams do in the upcoming draft? I know we talked about the injuries and everything and Sean McVay, but they're going to, I know that they don't get the first round pick. Detroit gets it. But in the offseason, what do you think they try to do to shore up some of their issues?
Yeah, it's tough without a first-round pick, but it's not the end of the world. And no, I'm not about to suggest the idea that I've been seeing going around about trading Jalen Ramsey for a first-round pick because I just don't think you do that.
No.
But I think that they'll have their first-rounder next year. They don't have it this year. They have a second rounder this year, right? So you have a second, you have a third, you don't have a fourth. I won't get into that because the Sony Michel trade was ridiculous. I still can't believe they traded. Bill Belichick is a magician. He got the Rams to give up a sixth and a future fourth for a guy that they were going to cut. So, they have plenty of picks. They've been hitting on guys later on in the draft. They got a starting safety in Jordan Fuller in the sixth. They've had guys in this draft like a Jacoby Durant in the fourth. So they've been able to do a nice job at the later rounds. Nick Scott, seventh rounder, guys like that. So now you get an opportunity to pick in the second again. The last time you picked in the second, the highest pick that you've had. Or not the last time, but the highest pick that you've made in 5 years, Cam Akers, he's starting to come on towards the end of the year. You start to wonder, okay, is the Achilles fully healthy? Is his mind all set? Like, is he back? Like, right now, you have to imagine he's closer to that than he is, from it. And so, you look at Van Jefferson, second rounder, they like him, cheap deal. Mm-hmm. That's the thing is the Rams got to find guys that can contribute next year because they do have some cap issues. Cap issues they could get by. They can restructure guys, but they're going to need to make the most of their picks. And I don't think they can just take gambles. I think they really got to go with best player available. They should not be drafting just based on need because if this season tells you anything, it doesn't really matter what you need. At the end of the day, people saying this team didn't have depth. All of their depth got depleted pretty quickly. All of their depth got hurt. So I think you just got to get the best players available And you got to get them on those cheap rookie deals. That's what's going to allow you to keep guys like Rob Havenstein and, Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald and Bobby Wagner and Cooper Kupp and, Matthew Stafford. It's going to allow you to pay those guys because you got to balance the roster somehow. Mm-hmm. People call it stars and scrubs in NBA. The NFL, it's way more to that than just that. So, I think you just got to balance it out. You got to be able to hit on all your picks, or at least the majority of your picks, because you put more pressure on yourself when you build a team this way.
Jake, I got to ask you, I haven't had the pleasure in my lifetime of experiencing this. So how long did the Super Bowl hangover last for you?
It's weird because I was in dynasty mode. I'll be honest. I felt like this was the start of something special, because the signs were there that it was. And when you look, there's only 3 teams in the NFL over the last 4 years that have been in the Super Bowl twice. The Rams, the Patriots, and the Chiefs. And you're like, the Patriots aren't really in it, right? I mean, they're not in the playoffs right now, but, they were in the playoffs last year and got decked pretty badly by the Bills. So then you look at the Chiefs, and you're like, okay. And there's no reason why the Rams and Chiefs can't be those teams. You got Sean McVay. It'll last as long as McVay's there. And they have Matthew Stafford. They signed a 5-year deal with him, and you're feeling good. The Von Miller thing, I think, really disrupted it because it's not that they don't have Von Miller, okay? It's that they allowed Von Miller to practically dictate their whole offseason. They waited for him so long. Von Miller didn't decide until everybody was gone. He didn't, and maybe he did. Maybe it was, a competitive thing. He's looking at the Rams. If he's not going to sign back with the Rams and he knows he's going to the Bills, we might see the Rams in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
If I'm already convinced I'm going to the Bills, I want to make them weaker.
Yep.
So, I think that was the first thing. And the second thing is Austin Corbett, who was phenomenal for them last year. And they let him go. And they signed 3 other offensive linemen, all of which aren't as good as Corbett. I'm not saying they're bad. I liked all 3 signings. But Corbett goes to Carolina. And sure enough, the season he had this year, I know not a lot of people, can know offhand how good a guy is in the trenches without going and watching all the tape. But, the stats back it up, and the tape definitely backs it up. I've watched it. I miss Austin Corbett, to say the least. He was exactly what he was last year, but I'd probably say twice as better. And that's the guy that they let go. So when you lose Whitworth, you lose Corbett, and you lose Von Miller, and you don't really replace Von Miller, right? Because you don't go in the draft and draft anybody until the 7th round in Daniel Hardy. And you don't really replace Austin Corbett. You just take a guy who was, playing center/guard last year as a backup in Coleman Shelton, and now he's the starting right guard, replacing him. And then you replace Whitworth with the guy who was already on the roster. It's like you didn't really get better, right? It kind of negates adding Bobby Wagner in a way, because Wagner was so important to this defense this year. But it didn't really matter because the team, obviously the injuries had a lot to do with it. But even if you remove the injuries, the fact that they let guys like Corbett go and they let Von Miller dictate what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. Everyone says they spent the money from Von Miller on Bobby Wagner. That's not entirely true. They spent the money from Von Miller on Allen Robinson, who was not a need. I understand trying to diversify your receiver room, but in turn, essentially, you trade away a team captain, a fan favorite, and someone that's integral to your offense going back to 2017 in Robert Woods. So they were really playing with fire. And I think it all starts with, and I've heard them, it all starts with Von Miller. When he decides to sign with the Bills, now we have this amount of money to play with. And I think the priority, if you need a pass rusher, should not have been getting Von Miller. It should have been going after the 6-year younger pass rusher in Hassan Reddick, and he's proven that this year. He's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL.
Jake, in the few minutes we got remaining, I got to ask you now, with the playoffs upon us this weekend, San Francisco to me looks like the team to beat in the NFC, and the AFC, it's wide open. I think it's maybe realistically down to maybe San Francisco and Philadelphia, but I like San Francisco. Obviously, Brock Purdy is everybody's darling right now, but I think they're the more complete team. You've seen them more than I have out on the West Coast. Is San Francisco a legit threat to go all the way?
Oh, yeah, I have them winning the Super Bowl. I don't take pleasure in saying that. I know that is definitely, not what I want to see. But, I'm not going to lie to myself just for the sake of the fact I don't like the team. Brock Purdy has been everything they could have asked for. And I know everyone is kind of banking on Brock Purdy making a mistake in the playoffs. And I understand that, Jimmy Garoppolo has made mistakes before. He's not Jimmy Garoppolo, though. When I watch Brock Purdy, he's playing better than I've ever seen Garoppolo play for the Niners. And I think Garoppolo is kind of underrated in a sense. I've given him flack for sure, but he is underrated and somewhat disrespected. But you have to understand something. As great as McVay is, I think Kyle Shanahan is he does such a great job of keeping everything so simple for his quarterbacks that, I would say he's better at it than McVay. I think McVay, I think his potential, the opportunity to score more points and, when he hits his limit, he's the better one, I would say. But I think Kyle Shanahan makes it so a guy like Brock Purdy can come into a system and just there's a constant flow of knowing when to run the ball, managing the clock, managing the game, but also giving your guy an opportunity. And it starts with how they have made up their receivers. You look at Brandon Ayuk, you look at Deebo Samuel, even, George Kittle at tight end.
Mm-hmm.
These guys make plays after the catch. And so you don't have to go with the deep ball. You can actually go with the short and intermediate game and kill teams because these guys are really hard to bring down. And that's not even including their elite defense coached by DeMeco Ryans, who they better enjoy him now because he's going to be out the door just like Robert Saleh as a head coach.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they're definitely the team to beat, Lou. I hate to say it, but I think the 49ers are going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in a rematch at the Super Bowl.
60 seconds we got left with you. If there's an upset pick in the NFC, who would it be?
It's weird because they have the higher seed, but I would take Tampa over Dallas.
Yeah.
There's still people that are sold on Dallas that, it's not a big deal. Once they get in the playoffs, they'll figure it out. No,
not
they won't.
Me.
No, they won't. They're potentially going to get routed on the road in Tampa. I don't think Tampa's that great, but I really don't think the Cowboys are that great. And I think it falls on Mike McCarthy. I just think that it's Mike McCarthy and Dak's regression that we're just going to ignore, apparently.
Boy, I tell you, some of these teams with good records besides Kansas or San Francisco, you've got Minnesota with zero defense, and Dallas isn't far behind. I'm right there with you. Jake, man, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking time out tonight with us. Enjoy the playoffs and take a breather. And then the Rams will be back, I got a feeling. But thanks for taking time out tonight. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you as always, Lou.
All right.
Take care.
All right, you bet. Jake Ellenbogen, the CEO of the Downtown Rams, joining us here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. A lot to unwrap with that conversation. And he seems to think that Sean McVay will be back. It's one of those things that, I was going to mention to him as well is, whenever you get a losing season, it's what have you done for me lately? And then, the stories get plucked. Is he burnt out? Can he regroup? Can he recharge? This and that and the other. Sean McVay's been there. He's been to the Super Bowl twice, and a ton of injuries. And is like Jake mentioned, not just the quote unquote star players or the skill positions. That offensive line took a massive hit as well. And so I agree with him there. They still got the pieces. They get Cooper Kupp back. They get some of that offensive line back. And then you start thinking about maybe Matthew Stafford's got a little bit left in the tank. I think they'll be back contending next year. So they didn't just fluke it winning all the way to the Super Bowl. But want to take time to thank Jake Ellenbogen again for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. You are watching the Captain Lou Extravaganza and listening to it here on the Captain Lou Sports Network. You can also find our podcast version on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio will be on there. It'll be downloaded by tomorrow. So check that out if there's something you missed in our show, or you can watch us on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. Become a subscriber. We've got a big prize package waiting for us when we get to 50 subscribers. It's a work in progress, but we're getting there. And we hope to see you as a subscriber. We got all of our episodes from the Captain Lou Extravaganza on there, as well as the ACHA Power Play, as we do that show every Tuesday night here on the Captain Lou Sports Network. And again, we are powered up by the Belly Up Network of podcasts. Check out BellyUpSports.com. We've got a great crew of podcasts. We've got an amazing crew of writers on the Belly Up Network. Check out BellyUpSports.com for the latest insight on all the major sports and all the sports that, quote unquote, are not the majors. That is BellyUpSports.com. Very blessed to be a part of the network here in 2023. Also, we want to thank you, the viewer, for taking time out. Without you, of course, it would not be possible. So you can drop us an email at sweetlou1965@yahoo.com right at the bottom of the page. Follow me on Twitter at The Real Captain Lou, or my Facebook page, the Captain Lou Extravaganza. And we invite you to do that. We've got a lot of interesting things going on there as well in 2023. Well, we mentioned the playoffs. First of all, I want to talk real briefly for about a minute or two about the College Football National Championship game. Ugly is the word of the day with that. 63 or 65-7. I took, it was funny because I went out on a limb. I thought I had a sure bet. TCU fooled me. I had 22.5 points, and I had over 52 for a parlay that was even money. I thought that was a sure win. Boy, was I wrong. They were like men playing with boys out there. What the holy hell? I don't know if they, being TCU, just were happy to be there, or they were starstruck, or what. But I look at that, and two things. Would Michigan have won or lost by that many against Georgia? I don't think so. Would Michigan have beaten Georgia? I don't know if they could go that far either. And I look at Ohio State. They came so close to beating Georgia. A missed field goal and a very, very bad call on a flag that was picked up on Marvin Harrison Jr. That would have turned things around. Could you have seen Ohio State do that to TCU? It's just so many variables with that. But you got to give credit to Georgia. They are the Kings, back-to-back champions. And I don't see them letting up. Stetson Bennett, I think the craziest stat with Stetson Bennett is he's as old as Lamar Jackson. And he's got 2 national championships already. They're both 25 years old. Unreal. Georgia's they're the standard bearer now. Whether Nick Saban wants to admit it, Jim Harbaugh, Ryan Day, whoever, Dabo Swinney, it's Georgia. It's Kirby. They are, to quote Ric Flair, they are the man. To be the man, you got to beat the man. And that's them right now. That's Georgia for you. So, hey, congratulations to the Bulldogs. They did it. They're already the preseason number 1 rank for next year, and why not? Some polls have Michigan number 2. Some have Ohio State. Who knows? Michigan, a lot of it's going to come down to Jim Harbaugh coming back. The saga continues with Jim Harbaugh. Hopefully we'll have more of an answer next week. I understand that he interviewed with Denver this week. Who knows if that's the case? Who knows if he's going to go there? You hear all these reports that are saying he's going to get $20 million. He's been offered $15 million. Well, if he's offered that kind of money, he'd be a damn fool not to take it. And the college football landscape changing so much every year with NIL monies and, the transfer portal, and who knows with the allegations coming up. And I know that there's no love lost, I think, between Ward Manuel and Jim Harbaugh. So a lot to unpack there as well. Who knows what's going to happen in Michigan. By this time next week on our next show, he might be a Denver Bronco. He might still be in Michigan. He might be in Indianapolis for all I know. That's Jim Harbaugh every year. He's the George Perlis of this generation who flirted with all these other jobs. So the only difference is Jim Harbaugh has won at every level that he's been. He's his own guy. He goes to the beat of his own drum. It's amazing. So we'll see if Jim Harbaugh indeed is going to be at Michigan. But getting back to Georgia, what a clinic. Some of those plays that they ran, it was like TCU forgot how to play defense. They forgot their playbook, and they just looked shell-shocked out there. And it was like men playing with boys. It was like an NFL team playing a Pop Warner team at times. It was that bad. I mean, 38-7 at halftime. It was 31-7. I thought, okay, well, maybe my bet will cover. Maybe they'll take it easy on them a little bit, but I don't know. So congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs. Hey, still to come in about 10 minutes, Max Bultman from The Athletic is going to join us as we start talking NHL hockey. The Detroit Red Wings are just about halfway through this 2022-2023 campaign, and they're doing pretty good. They're not quite at a playoff spot yet. They're, I think, 7 points out of the last playoff spot, but we're going to talk to Max about the Red Wings and get his thoughts on the progress that they've made in the first half of the season, another season of the Iser plan in Detroit. But while we've got a few minutes, let's go back to the playoffs. Let's take a look at the lines for this coming weekend. And it's crazy, as Jake Ellenbogen mentioned, you got some road teams that are favorites. Some of these, it's funny because we've got our 6-point teaser locks of the week. There's so many to choose from where you take 6 points off the line and the over-unders. I look at some of these lines. I mean, Dallas, a 2.5-point favorite at Tampa Bay. I don't see it. You got Minnesota, a 3-point favorite home against the Giants without that defense. The Chargers are a 2-point favorite in Jacksonville. That's intriguing. There's going to be some fun watches on this one. I think my biggest shot at an upset, as much as I would like to agree with Jake, I like his pick of saying that Tampa Bay is going to win. They're the quote-unquote underdog, even though they're at home. I'm not sold on Dallas winning a big game. But the only thing I think they got going is that loss to Washington may have been a wake-up call. But they got to, they've got to get on the same page. And I don't know if Dak is 100% healthy in that one, but that's such a toss-up. But my upset pick, really, watch out for the Giants. Minnesota only beat them on a 61-yard field goal. Minnesota's defense is putrid. They're bad. And they beat Chicago last weekend against a third-string quarterback. I think New York can move the ball on them. It's going to be indoors, so the weather's not going to be a factor. And I honestly think the Giants got a real shot at beating the Vikings. I don't know if I'd take them in a straight-up bet, but I look at some of these other games, and I look at San Francisco. Seattle didn't impress me last weekend. God bless the Rams. They gave them all they could. But with a third-string with Baker Mayfield, in essence, second or third-string quarterback, so a beat-up line, as Jake mentioned. They should have won that game. They could have won that game against Seattle. Has Geno Smith shot his wad? Now they got to go to San Francisco. I don't see it. Buffalo, to me, is going to walk all over Miami. Tua's not going to start. That's a no-brainer. The only thing I'm wondering about that is, are they going to cover the spread? And I really like Cincinnati over Baltimore. Lamar's probably not going to play. Huntley hasn't even thrown yet. Who knows what's going on there? So that's kind of, if I had to pick them from 1 to 6, Buffalo, I think, is the biggest lock. Obviously, when you're betting money line, it'd be Buffalo, then it'd be San Francisco, Cincinnati. Then you got some toss-ups there, Jacksonville and the Chargers. That could go either way. Is the stage going to be too big for the Jaguars? This is a chance to me to see how they're going to perform in the opening round of the playoff. Is Trevor Lawrence, how is he going to perform under the bright lights of being in the stage in the playoffs? Again, the Minnesota in the game against the Giants. Can Minnesota win a big game in the playoffs? And then you look at the Chargers with Herbert. This is it's such a tale of two quarterbacks as far as not really being in the playoff limelight. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But let's go to our teaser locks of the week. These are my 6-point teaser locks of the week. I was 1-1 last week. So I'm still 13 games above 500, but I picked a couple of different locks of the week for my 6-point teaser locks. If you remember what the line is with the Cincinnati game, they're 8.5-point favorites at home. You take 6 points off the over-under, or the line. The over-under is 40.5. I don't think Baltimore is going to get more than 14 points if they're lucky. I think this is going to be kind of like a 30-14 game, or a 27-7 game. So I'm going to go with the under. If you take the 6-point teaser, I'm going to go under 4, add 6. So you can say under 46.5. I'm going to take Cincinnati minus 2.5 and the under 46.5. It's even money, plus 100. You bet $20, you get $20 back on top of that. Easy bet, in my opinion. The other game that I'm looking at, San Francisco against Seattle. I just don't see Seattle being in that ballpark. I agree with Jake. I think San Francisco right now, to me, has got to be the favorite in the NFC. With all due respect to Philadelphia, I know they're the number 1 seed, but you don't know how healthy Jalen Hurts really is. You hear Sirianni talk. You don't know how healthy he is. San Francisco, to me, is the team to beat in the NFC. And I think they're going to start flexing their muscles against Seattle. Seattle put up, 19 points? What was it? 19 against San Francisco, against the Rams at home. They're going to go to San Francisco this weekend. Who knows what the weather's going to be like in San Francisco with the rains and everything. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I'm going to take the 6-point teaser, and I'm going to go down to 3.5. I'm going to take Frisco, laying the 3.5, and I think they're going to get under 48.5 points. You get plus 105. So if you bet $10, you get $10.50. To me, that's a pretty simple bet there. And that brings us to our super teaser. Lock both of these together. You get really good odds. To me, it's worth taking a chance. Plus 310, you put $20 on it, you get 60 back on it. I like those odds. I like those bets. Those are going to be my Captain Lou Extravaganza 6-point teaser locks of the week right there. We've made money this year on them. It's been a good year doing the 6-point teasers. We're going to keep it going. I know you don't get the plus 700 or 600 that you would get if you do the regular line bets, but smart money is better money. It's safer money. I know nothing is a lock. Obviously things happen, but the closest I'd come to a lock for this weekend with my teasers are these 2 bets right here. And if you follow my lead, hopefully you can cash on them. We were 1-1 last week, but it's going to be a fun weekend of football, starting out with the 2 games on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and then the Monday night game with Dallas and Tampa Bay. We all knew that was a no-brainer. That was going to be the game as far as the Super Bowl, or I'm sorry, the last game of the weekend in the wild card round. Then things will get interesting in the AFC, especially when it comes down to potential neutral site games and whatnot, should Buffalo and Kansas City both win next weekend. And then you got Cincinnati, in the mix as well. But this weekend's going to be some fun games. San Francisco plays on Saturday. The Giants play on Sunday. I mean, we've got some great matchups. And this is the fun time of year. One of my favorite weekends in the NFL season. That, of course, is a wild card weekend. Then the divisional rounds start up as well, coming up the following weekend, next weekend. So this is one of my favorite times of year, along with October, when you've got the baseball playoffs, the NFL in high gear, and of course, March Madness. So we'll follow it all right here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. Still to come, we got Max Bultman joining us from The Athletic. We're going to talk some Detroit Red Wings hockey with him very shortly. And so we invite you to stick around for that. As a matter of fact, let's go to our Captain Lou Extravaganza guest line, and let's bring in the beat writer for The Athletic for the Detroit Red Wings, Max Bultman, joining us back on the show. Max, thanks for taking time out tonight. How are you?
Hey, my pleasure, Lou. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you. Let's get right into it. Last night, the Red Wings were exploded for 7 against Winnipeg. Nice little offensive showing for the Wings. 39 points in 41 games. Give me your, right off the top, your initial cliff notes of how you think the first half of the season has gone for the Wings.
Yeah, I mean, up and down for sure. I think it's a step forward on the whole. I think that they've been a more consistent team this year.
Yeah.
Even on nights that they've lost, I think they're in a lot of these games, and they're playing close games. Even they had this little mini losing streak, 3 games against the Panthers, the Devils, and the Maple Leafs.
Mm-hmm.
They played those teams even, and you just saw kind of the elite talent of the other teams push them above. But in past years, it's been a much more stark, gameplay difference. And so I think that's where they've narrowed the gap most of all. Not a playoff team yet in my eyes, and obviously as the standings are right now, that's the case. But I think it's been a step forward.
Max, one of the things that I've noticed with them this year is they don't get pushed around like they have in the past either. If someone's gone after them, if someone tries to punch them in the mouth, they come right back. I look at some of the games against Tampa Bay, for example, where you could tell Detroit frustrated them and they tried to goad them into some bad penalties, and Detroit didn't do it. They didn't take the bait. And that's one thing that I think that they've learned, and it's proven positive for them this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that, you add some of these veteran players who have been through playoff series, your David Perrons, your Ben Sherratts, your Andrew Kopps. How often are those the guys that are in there pulling guys off
Yep.
the younger players? And I do think you notice that.
We talk about some of the guys that they brought in actually here in this season. The free agent acquisitions. You talked about Perron and Kopp. I think Kopp's been very serviceable for Detroit. Forgot about Sherratt, but obviously it starts, with Husso. I think he's played very, very well for Detroit in goal.
Yeah, he has, and I think it's come down to earth a little bit. Recently, probably due to overwork, and honestly, I wonder if it's shades of what happened with Alex Nedeljkovic last year, who was out to a tremendous start, up to right about this same time. And then the wear of the grind of the season got to him, and he went into a little slump. I think it's something to keep an eye on, because you don't want it to take that turn for Ville Husso too.
Right.
But I do think in general he's a little more of a steady kind of profile of goalie. I don't think the extremes are quite as wide with him, and I think for the type of team that we just talked about, the Red Wings becoming, that is important. And I think he's been through the first 25 games he was probably their MVP. And I think even now he's still probably been maybe the most important of all the additions they made in the summer.
Oh, 100%. I love the play of Perron, and Kubalik to me has played really well too. I didn't see that coming out of him this year.
Right. And that's been a big bounce back too. He scores the other night, but I think he's been huge. Same deal for him, right? He started off so hot. He was at a point per game, I think right around 25 games. That's cooled off a little. That's just part of it with goal scorers. They're streaky.
Yeah.
But right now he's well on pace to have 25 goals. And I think you look at the price that they paid for him. I mean, that's great value. So
it sure is. Let's get back to the goaltending situation. You've been around Detroit long enough now. The 3 biggest, the 3 toughest jobs besides maybe the mayor in Detroit: quarterback, closer, and goaltender. Husso's been entrenched right now at number 1. I know Ned was sent down to Grand Rapids for conditioning and maybe, a confidence builder. What do you see panning out for the rest of the year behind Husso, maybe as the backup as we get towards the end?
It's a fascinating question. I'm surprised that they've managed to kick that decision down the road even this far, right?
Right.
Balancing 3 goalies is not something we see NHL teams do, and certainly not sustain. So I'm surprised it's lasted this long. I've got my eye on the Griffins game right now. Nedeljkovic is you're met again tonight. He's been really good down there so far. I think in time, I mean that's kind of the best case scenario is for him to come back up and be your number 2. But Hellberg has not been bad when he's been for them, and so I don't know the answer to what they do here. And the more time that goes, it just seems like that speaks more to how much that they have liked Magnus Hellberg. So I guess I still think Nedeljkovic. I think that's what I would do. But really credit to Hellberg, a guy who had not played in North America, had spent most of his career playing Recently in the KHL,
Yeah.
he's done a heck of a job. He's been waived multiple times and claimed and moved his whole life around. Great story.
It's so funny because it seems like hockey is, Max, hockey is such a different sport when it comes to that. Maybe baseball a little bit, but people don't understand a guy like Hellberg. You mentioned it, getting waived, going all over the world, and then you got to be on your A game when you're called up, and that's what just impresses the hell out of me with him when he is called upon by the Wings and plays as well as he does.
It's such a good point, Lou. And the situations that he's been in, I think, especially in Detroit, when you come in and you're the third goalie, right?
Yeah.
It's not just that there's two guys on the depth chart in front of you. It's that when you practice, there are still only two nets. I mean, you're splitting reps with the other backup, and it's not always a split that goes in your favor. Like, even the amount of pucks you're seeing in practice is not what you'd like to be when you have three goalies. And so it's tough for everyone, but it's especially tough for the guys who are the numbers 2 and 3 there.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to have come through that and found a way to get some starts, he played like 3 out of 4 games for him last week. So yeah, I've been very impressed with him, and he's a really good guy too. I mean, he's taken it all in stride for sure.
I'm rooting for him as well. I think that it would be awesome if he could find a home. Maybe it might be with Detroit. Not that I have anything against Ned, but if he can't make it with Detroit, I hope this is big enough for him to land somewhere permanent in the NHL for a few years. We're joined by Max Bultman. He writes for The Athletic, covering the Detroit Red Wings. Very gracious with his time here for a few more minutes tonight. Max, you're keeping an eye on the Griffins, and I noticed tonight that Jacob Vrana, it was a healthy scratch. Veterans restrictions, I think, is what I saw before the game started. It's been a rough year for him, obviously, personal reasons and whatnot. He was put on waivers, cleared waivers. He's in Grand Rapids right now. Do you think he's back in Detroit later on this year for starters?
I really don't know, and it's shocking to me that we could be at this place for a player who I think is among the more talented players in the entire organization. But I think it tells you something, right? I think he's had like you said, a very complicated year, and it's hard to separate all of it, right? But you point to the kind of the veterans role in the AHL. It's not like he's not allowed to play tonight. The rule is you can only have so many players with so much experience.
Oh, okay.
Dressing in an AHL game because they want it to be a developmental league. So basically, what it is they're choosing some of these guys like Kyle Criscuolo over him, and Criscuolo has been a great pro for the Red Wings organization. He's been a call up. He spent his time in GR. He's played in the AHL for them, and the AHL is a really important league for any organization. Yeah. So he's been kind of a good soldier there for him. But you look on the talent, and there's no question. So I do think it's an interesting development here that he's now effectively basically what it is. He's a scratch for the Griffins, and so I'm surprised it's gotten to this point. But I think if you look at the hockey side of things, as dynamic of a scorer as Jacob Vrana is, his game has not necessarily always been the most complete. And I wonder if that is sort of a bottom line here. And he hasn't necessarily produced. So we can, someone asked Derek Lalonde this question the other day after a game, is this where you guys miss Vrana's offense? I think it might have been after the Florida game. Yeah. And he kind of made the point, yes, but and he said this, it's potential right now with Vrana. He's got zero goals for the Griffins in this stint. I don't really necessarily know what to make of it. Do I think he'll be back with the Red Wings? I don't know. I think as long, if there's injuries, he's certainly one of the guys who has the NHL talent that you would feel good plugging in. But it's clearly more, there's clearly kind of more to that decision than just the scoring. So boy, I'm surprised at the turns it's taken so far.
Definitely an enigma for sure. It's kind of crazy. We'll keep an eye on that as well. How big was it having Bertuzzi back last night?
Yeah, I think it was. And I don't know that he had an amazing game. I think you've noticed kind of a couple turnovers from him. It's happened the same time last time, when he first came back. But I think he just helps lengthen their lineup. And you look at, the line of him and Larkin and Raymond at the top, it just kind of allows the rest of the lineup to spread out nicely and have scoring on every line. So I think that's one of the biggest things he does, and he will score those goals. He's a 30-goal scorer. He can score on the net. He can score on a shot. He can show you some really good hands as well. So I think it does matter. And obviously the big story now is what happens from here.
Yeah.
He is a pending unrestricted free agent. He, they obviously haven't reached any extension, and we haven't heard really any. When we've asked Tyler about it, it's not something he's necessarily been eager to talk about. So trade deadline coming, and that's going to be one of the big storylines to watch for the Red Wings.
Boy, I was going to ask you that. You already answered my question. If he was going to be dangled out at the deadline, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, if there's no extension, I don't know how you don't. I mean, I don't think you can risk letting a 30-goal scorer leave the organization for nothing. So
great point.
It's different circumstances, I think, with him and Dylan Larkin, because Larkin has the no trade clause, and I think Larkin's been on the record multiple times as saying that Detroit's where he wants to be. That's maybe a little different dynamic, but center is especially so hard to replace. But it's going to be interesting.
Boy, do you honestly think Detroit? You mentioned, or we just mentioned it at the top of the interview. They're 7 points out of a playoff spot, Max. I don't know if Detroit's at the point where they would be buyers at the trade deadline. I think that would still lean to them being more as sellers. What kind of a vibe do you think?
I agree with you. I don't see them buying, at least for this year. I mean, maybe if there's a guy who they think they can go and get, who's going to be in the future. You look at kind of the Nick Leddy trade from last year, right?
Yes.
They're obviously selling Nick Leddy, but they are bringing in Jake Wallman and Oscar Sundqvist, who have been, played big roles on this team.
Oh,
Jake Wallman's one of the better stories of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So buying in that sense, I could see them looking to add more than just, picks and prospects, looking to add players who can play for them, especially beyond this season. But I don't think you're chasing a rental for a playoff or anything like that.
You talk about good stories, and a guy that I've always been rooting for, especially this year, has been Filip Hronek. I think he's having a fantastic year. To me, Max, in Detroit last year, he seemed like he was the punching bag, and I just love that he's having a great year.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, people took a lot of shots at him. There's no doubt about that. I mean, for a guy who was as promising as he was early, he took the brunt of these tough minutes as really the number one defenseman for the couple seasons before Seider arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you saw what that looks like. It's very tough to do. And last year Seider comes in, and I don't obviously a little bit less in load. Seider takes a little more minutes, but this year Hronek has been awesome. And I know I saw one of our analytics guys, Dom Lucian, has Hronek in the top 10 on his model for the Norris Trophy this year. So I don't know that I'm quite there, but it does tell you how good some of the numbers have been, right?
Could you imagine talking in October about Hronek being in the top 10 for any kind of Norris talk? That's awesome.
No, I couldn't. I couldn't have. So I think it's a credit to him. He's played great hockey at both ends. His production's been really good, but I've noticed him as good defensively as I can remember him being in the NHL. So it's a huge credit to him, no doubt.
And Max, we'll get you out of here in a few minutes. I really appreciate your time. Derek Lalonde, first year. I think he's done well. It's a tough, it's always a tough transition when you take over for a guy who's been here as long as the previous coach has. What's been your initial impression of Lalonde after 39 games?
Yeah, I've been impressed by him. I think he clearly has a vision. He's got, he last night, you mentioned they win this 7-5 game. Trying to get some offense going. He came into that press conference and called it their worst game of the season. And I think that's because the defense was among the worst it's been this season.
Man.
And it is very clear that is a bottom line for him.
Yeah.
And so you talk about a guy who is not going to get, caught up in the moment. Here he is after a 7-5 win, saying it's their worst game of the season. I think that tells you a lot about him setting the standard and sticking to it. I think it's a strength of his.
I got to tell you, I watched that third period last night, and I watched most of the game, and it just seemed like Detroit couldn't get the puck out of their own zone, and they were fortunate to come out of that. And you find good teams find ways to win games like that. But I can see why he was a little PO'd with that performance. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they gave up as many high danger chances as I can remember them doing. A lot more than they had in those 3 losses, right?
Oh, no kidding.
Funny how the game works sometimes.
Oh, sure is. Max, just about halfway through the NHL, who's your biggest surprise? To me, it's got to be the Kraken. Their record is amazing. Couple of teams in your eyes that have opened, maybe surprised you a little bit good, and then maybe one that hasn't done as well as you thought might have been doing here in the first half.
Yeah, I think 2 that stand out beyond the Kraken, because I agree with you there. The Winnipeg Jets, the team that the Red Wings saw last night.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know what was going to happen there. They move on from Paul Maurice. I think they've taken a really a turn for the better here under Rick Bowness. They've been really impressive. They've got another defenseman kind of breaking out, Josh Morrissey, who's been really good. Pierre-Luc Dubois has taken a huge step. They're going to challenge for the Central Division. Eventually, you expect Colorado to make their run, but as of right now, Winnipeg and Dallas are at the top of that division.
Wow.
They both look good.
Yeah.
And then New Jersey. New Jersey, Lou, last year, I thought might have been the worst team I saw.
You and me both.
And, part of it's because Jack Hughes was hurt for a lot of that year, but wow, have they taken a huge step under Lindy Ruff. Jack Hughes is an MVP finalist for me. We're going to see how the second half plays out, but he has been tremendous. I did not see him having this kind of goal scoring ability. I thought he was more of a playmaking type. He has been outstanding, and the New Jersey Devils have ridden him. And Nico Heischer's been awesome too.
Yeah.
He's a great, obviously the 2 number 1 overall picks. No shock, but they look really good.
I know, like you and I think are in agreement. Detroit's probably a year or 2 away from getting into the playoffs, but if they were to get to the playoffs, what do you think the point threshold would be?
I think it's 98, 99.
Okay.
Last year it was 100, right? The Eastern Conference is a bear right now. I think the pace right now is 98,
Wow.
So to get there, it's a long road ahead. You basically got to get 57 or so points over the last 43 games.
Yeah.
You basically got to play like what Toronto did in the first half.
That's going to be tough.
Well,
Max, I know you got a lot on your plate. I'll let you go. I appreciate you coming on tonight. It's always fun catching up with you. I really enjoy your work on The Athletic, by the way. Keep it up. It's great and always very informative. Enjoy the second half of the year, and maybe we'll get you on at the end of the NHL season, preview the playoffs, and maybe even talk the Wings if they get on that magical run.
Hey, Lou, thank you for saying all that, and thank you for having me. Just let me know. We'll do it anytime. All
right. Thank you. Max Bultman from The Athletic joining us, covers the Red Wings again. Check out his work at theathletic.com. Excellent, excellent work. He does a fantastic job and some great insight on the Wings. And I agree. I think, Detroit may be a year or 2 away, but they're fun to watch. They picked it up a little bit. They've got a good mix of youngsters, and it's going to be interesting to see what the Wings do at the deadline. But hockey season is here. It's always here on this show. Obviously, football overshadows it in the fall, but now with the playoffs and the NFL season, the regular season over the playoffs starting, we're going to gear our attention more towards the NHL here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. So, hey, it's been a great show tonight. That's going to about do it. Again, our locks of the week, our 6-point teaser locks of the week. Let's get those on real quick one more time. So many games to choose from, but take these to the bank right here. I've got San Francisco. They're going to lay 3.5, and they're going to keep it under 48.5 against the Seahawks. That's plus 105. And our other lock of the week, our 6-point teaser lock of the week, Cincinnati, minus 2.5 and under 46.5. That's even money. Put them both together. It's plus 310. Make yourself a little extra money for Valentine's. That's coming up. So there you go. All right. As I mentioned, that's going to do it. I want to really thank Jake Ellenbogen from the Downtown Rams for joining us, talking LA Rams football and his thoughts on the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl. And of course, want to thank Max Bultman from The Athletic. He writes for the Detroit Red Wings, talking a little Red Wings hockey. Always good to catch up with Max. Gets us fired up for the hockey season. And again, as always, want to thank you, the viewer, for taking time out to check out the Captain Lou Extravaganza, our second show of 2023. We'll be back next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock normal time next week. We'll have another hour program for you. We'll have the best in guests. We'll talk about the first round of the NFL playoffs. We'll get some NHL talk, and who knows what else. Maybe we'll squeeze in a little baseball talk with Carlos Correa. Maybe he will stick with the Twins this time, his third contract he signed in the last couple of months. So, all right, that's going to do it. We want to thank the folks at Belly Up Sports for powering up our podcast. As always, we are on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. We invite you to subscribe to that for all of our shows. This one, and of course, the ACHA Power Play that we do every week as well during the hockey season. Captain Lou saying, keep your heads up, keep your sticks down, keep your feet moving, and as always, keep your minds open. Until next week, so long, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. So long.